The Famicom is widely considered to be one of the most important video game consoles ever made. It became the birthplace, the ground zero for a huge variety of franchises that are still alive and kicking today, even after almost 4 decades. Many of those blockbuster titles were soon given sequels, and once the sunset of the 8-bit era arrived as the 1990s came to be, they were also handed a golden ticket as the doors to the next generation opened up upon them. The arrival of the newest high-end 16-bit systems signified that the times of NES dominance were about to end. However, even under these circumstances, many developers kept bringing some incredible games to the system, and it's in these times that the game I want to talk to you about today came to be. A game that in my eyes is one of the most well-hidden gems of the NES library. A game that, although bizarre and quirky, remains after multiple decades as an impressive piece of work that pushed the console beyond its limits. And that game is none other than Gimmick. Gimmick was launched into Japanese stores on the 31st of January 1992. Just as I mentioned in the intro, at that time the Famicom, known as the NES outside of its native country, had already seen the release of its successor. Thus, many developers turned their heads to the new and shiny Super Famicom, while only a few remained in known territory, pushing the system in ways no one had ever seen before. These last years of activity came along with the release of games like Battletoads and Double Dragon, Mega Man 4-6, or Kirby's Adventure, entries on the console's library that showcased that the Grey Block had not thrown in the towel just yet. And among those development teams who refused to give up, we have Sunsoft. Being both a developer and a publisher, this Japanese company, with its HQ located in the city of Conan, managed to rise into popularity thanks to the immense quality of their licensed video games. After all, they were responsible for classics like Batman or Fester's Quest, as well as adapting other companies' titles to the NES, like Sega's Afterburner. Still, the most revolutionary pieces of software with Sunsoft's name on the box were without any doubts their own self-crafted work. Although obscure, games like Blastomaster, Journey to Silius, or Euphoria are fondly remembered nowadays by those who were lucky enough to run into them. These games offer very unique experiences, while showcasing a surprising level of polish and quality, a balance of characteristics that were very difficult to find back in the day. Sadly, as the end of this era of gaming rapidly approached, Sunsoft found themselves in trouble. They decided to stick to their guns and remain tied to the slowly fading NES. And time was running out. To achieve another home run, they needed to really impress store owners just to convince them to choose their product over the wave of technically superior SNES games. And then, enter Tomomi Sakai. Having experience as a developer thanks to arcade games, Sakai made his debut with Sunsoft as a programmer for the light gun shooter game Freedom Force. Just as he revealed in an interview with Japanese medium Saiso, translated and posted into the internet by Glitterberry, as he worked on multiple Sunsoft games, he began to wish to create a project of his own. And this project wasn't going to be just a game, it was meant to be the magnum opus of the company. The first step towards it was trying to gather the best of the best among his office. Allow me to cite his own words on this one. At the time, there were 2 really talented designers named Iwata and Kagoya who had worked on Blaster Master. In my mind, if I finished my team's game just as they finished theirs, it would be easy to get them to join the production of Gimmick, so I fine-tuned my game's development schedule to complete it on time. He even managed to get help from Naohisa Morota, who was known among the team as a fantastic sound programmer. With the Sunsoft Elite behind his back, Sakai finally had the chance to fulfill his wish. And while they had assistance from other people in the office, only 4 developers completed the biggest chunk of the game, in a time span of about 2 years. Once everything was said and done, the last day of 1992's month of January was chosen as the date of Gimmick's release. Upon arrival, unfortunately, the Japanese gaming press was not impressed. Famitsu left a mild 26 out of 40, and despite their hard work, Sakai remembers how it was still pretty difficult to convince shop owners to actually sell the game. On that same interview, he recalls how the finished product was shown in 1992's Tokyo Toy Show, and how those who approached the stand always asked if it was a Super Nintendo game. And when they learned it was meant to be a release on the NES, they just walked away. And so, sales were not as spectacular, with those who did buy the cartridge back in the day criticizing the extreme difficulty of the game. Things turned out for the worse when Gimmick's release in the United States was cancelled. Only a small Scandinavian publisher chose to launch the game outside of Japan's frontiers, and that is how, surprisingly, the game arrived in Europe in May of 1993 under the name of Mr. Gimmick. However, it did so with a very limited stock. So why do I speak of this specific game in such a positive way compared to the mixed, uninterested reception that it saw back in '92? Well, allow me to dive in. As soon as you boot up your console, Gimmick will welcome you with a cutscene. With no words being spoken and no text being displayed, the players are left with a series of illustrations that picture the plot setup of the game. Our protagonist, Yumetaro, is a yokai, a creature from Japanese folklore akin to a being of the occult. It all begins when the little green fellow accidentally becomes a birthday present for a girl, after being mistaken for a toy. That very same night, however, all of the girl's plushies suddenly come to life. Jealous after losing their owner's attention upon Yumetaro's arrival, they respond by kidnapping her while she's sleeping. Being the only one who can save her, the little green yokai gathers up all of his courage and follows them through a portal, leading into unknown territory. And so, the adventure begins. Gimmick presents itself as a linearly structured 2D platformer. Players will take control over Yumetaro as they carry him through many obstacles across 7 different stages. Each one of them possesses a specific premise, with unique challenges and a boss to defeat at the end. While simple in nature, it only takes a few seconds of playtime to notice that there is more to this game than just jumping around and throwing stars. To begin with, the main character's movements are affected by inertia. This is taught to players right away, showcased by the presence of slopes on the very first screen, along with conveyor belts in both directions. These two elements are almost like a testing ground to understand how Yumetaro reacts to them. Among those, these small round creatures act as your very first opponents. There couldn't possibly be a better starting enemy for a game like this, since they are used to demonstrate a few key elements about the gameplay. On one hand, they will test the player's knowledge about the main character's offensive capabilities, since jumping on them will not cause any harm, and this will become relevant later in the game, by the way. This should lead most people to aim a star at them, which results in a success. Furthermore, by fiddling around with the star, it's possible that you may end up noticing that you can land on top of it. And just like that, the basics of the gameplay have been shown to whoever is holding the controller, taking advantage of terrain, and using the star as both a weapon and a platform will be required later on, so it's crucial to have a decent grasp of the functioning right off the bat. This is called a teaching element, and it's a common way of having a tutorial that's not driven by words or by a bunch of tasks, but by sheer curiosity. And all of this learning is done in just one screen, and about a minute of playtime. However, since there is no timer in this game, if you don't catch the game's drift right away, there is zero rush. While Gimmick is known for being notoriously difficult, it's impossible to ignore how brilliant the level design is during the very first minutes of playtime, which are arguably the most important in a game like this. Now that I have introduced you all to the main gimmicks, no pun intended, except this, and how the first screen teaches you about them, I can finally remove this self-imposed barrier and talk about the rest of the level design, which is easily one of the most important aspects of the 2D platformer genre. Just as I said before, Gimmick has 7 different stages that will always flow in the same order. That screen I told you about is just the beginning of the docks, a simple yet challenging level with progressively difficult jumps that will slowly ease the players into tougher sections. At the end, Yumetaro faces off against a giant version of that very same enemy we saw at the start, kickstarting his journey through this bizarre world. And on the topic of bosses, they all ooze personality from every single crevice of their existence. Even though the girl's toys cover up most of the slots, the game does not falter when it comes to delivering surprises. At one point, you may be fighting a silly bird, and then you get to stage 5, where one of your most run-of-the-mill enemies will fight you by using a laser-equipped crane. And then, this happens. Do I need to say more? This personality also extends to the levels, since they all have a special trait that separates them from the rest, like the environmental hazards of the forest, the machinery and vehicles inside the mines, or the dangerous boat ride at the pirate ship. Also, each stage has set pieces that are designed with your character's moveset in mind, creating fun challenges that can be approached in multiple ways thanks to the versatile nature of Yumetaro's star. All of that converges at the 6th level, the Tower, a marathon that combines many of the challenges that the player has already experienced before, in one long, difficult trial. And when I say difficult, I really mean that. Yeah, even if Gimmick's a simple game to understand, and a game that masterfully teaches you how its rules work, that doesn't mean it's a walk in the park. Don't let its cozy appearance fool you. This is not Green Kirby, and you will surely come to understand why. And so, to aid you on the journey, our green pear-like plushy body has access to a very interesting inventory system. The same way the first screen teaches you all you need to know about movements and abilities, the next few ones will slowly ease the player into using items and managing the 3-slot inventory that Yumetaro has. By picking up these bottles, the main character can obtain a small variety of one-use tools that can be saved and summoned at any time. At first, these might seem a bit complicated to manage, since the NES only has 2 face buttons. Using items works just like in Castlevania, for example. You press up on the D-pad and then hold the B button to use any of these, while pressing down cycles through the 3 slots on the inventory. It's one of those things you need to get accustomed to. Luckily, the game offers you a few screens that are specifically designed for them, so experimentation is rewarded. These items come in 3 different forms: a pink projectile that goes through enemies in a straight line, a powerful bomb, and a potion that recovers HP. The only items that won't be going to the inventory are these yellow potions. They increase Yumetaro's health to an extra point until the level is beaten. The existence of these are not only a welcomed addition to the gameplay, since they all come in handy at some point during the adventure, but they are also a way to incentivize exploration despite the linearity of the game's progression. But then, one question may arise. Why would you, right? Because if the main target is to survive through each challenge, beat the boss and continue onwards, Why would you care to explore these places, considering HP upgrades are usually on the main path? Well, Gimmick has an answer for you. So, let's say you plunge through the whole adventure, you defeat all of the evil, jealous plushies. When you finally get to the tower, you reach the end, take out the 3 final bosses, and that's it, right? Roll the credits. But then, both you and your character will come to a realization. What about the kid, right? If you paid close attention to my words thus far, you might have noticed already, but this isn't the real ending to the game. The tower is the 6th out of 7 stages, with the final one being a secret to those brave enough to find their way in. How do you do that? Well, allow me to explain, because there's more to this than what meets the eye. Going back to the interview with Tomomi Sakai, he reveals one detail about his experience as a game designer that is very present in Gimmick. Having worked for many years in the arcade industry, his views on what makes a game entertaining is truly interesting. Allow me to cite his words once more. Arcade games are unprofitable if people can continue playing for long periods, so their level of difficulty is steeply curved. However, there are also players capable of clearing the games, giving them a glimpse into an unseen world. Those who were truly skilled weren't just people who were good at games, they were crowd pleasers whose gameplay charmed the audience. They knew how to charm people, and that's the basis of entertainment, I think. And that statement deeply resonates within Gimmick. In the same way arcade games became more charming in Sakai-san's eyes when an experienced player took the helm, Gimmick becomes more charming as your skills improve. And nothing represents this idea better than the existence of the final 7th stage. So let's get into that. Despite being a difficult game, sometimes even crossing the line of what's considered fair, Gimmick is very lenient on the player compared to some other entries on the system. While the number of lives is limited, after a game over, it is possible to continue infinite times. Going back to the start of the stage is the only penalty you'll face when this happens. However, to see the true ending of the story, one of the 2 requirements you need to fulfill is to reach the top of the tower without ever using a single continue. And this is both Gimmick's biggest strength and its biggest flaw. So allow me to digress for a quick moment and steadily discuss the dark side of this game before going any further. Thing is, the nature of some of these game's levels will probably make even the most skilled of players sweat. There will be obstacles that I doubt anyone could clear on their first attempt. And the perfect example of that is found on level 3, the boots. Close to the end, you'll arrive at this transition. If you walk too far, you'll be quickly struck by this falling rock that can even catch you before regaining control over the main character. Immediately after, you will have to face a cannon that shoots arrows at you, and then the player is asked to avoid the explosion triggered by this button, jump after getting enough speed from the ramp, perform an almost pixel-perfect jump to maintain their speed, and face a mini-boss. Fail at any of those steps, and it's very likely that you will lose a life. These examples of weird difficulty spikes, or gacha moments as I call them, really clash with how the rest of the game is built. And they are clearly here to catch unsuspecting players off guard, and maybe extend playtime in an artificial way. Even if these cases are exceptions to the otherwise thoughtful design of the game, while scars, if you happen to die to any of these and your true ending run comes to a screeching end, it might leave a bitter taste in your mouth. What are my neighbors doing? On the other hand, I cannot be as critical to the other requirement to find this coveted final stage, since it truly embraces what Gimmick wants to be. So, along your way to the end, you might have seen some places that look suspicious. If you happen to be curious enough to investigate them further, you will find a magical treasure. These make up the second requirement, as you need to collect all 6 of them to unlock the secret stage. And when I mean 6 of them, it's the fact that there is one of them in every single stage. One thing I will give the game credit for is that since the first one is pretty easy to locate, there is a high chance that even first-time players might be aware of their presence. What makes them so great in this game's context is how they clearly reflect Gimmick's identity. They are collectibles meant for expert players, since getting your hands on most of these require quite some finesse with the controls, as well as a keen eye to find the necessary steps to reach the areas where they're hidden. Most of the time you are just shown the entrance, leaving the rest to your imagination to just follow the dots and get your prize. Another positive is how the penalty for failing to complete the puzzle is usually just losing a bunch of time, except for two of them that are hilariously punishing for no reason. The one in stage 2 will most likely take out one of your lives or force you to waste a bunch of time, but then the one in stage 4 comes in to grab your run and throw it into the trash. To get the magic sword, first you need to find your way up to this pit, which can be done in multiple ways by using your star accordingly. Thing is, if you fail, there is a fate worse than death awaiting you, which is a checkpoint. That means that if you want to try again, you need to empty your life count. But wait, doing so ends your run, and that means it's a lose-lose situation that's pretty frustrating to experience. That aside though, finding your way to each one of the treasures is mostly a fun experience, and solving the puzzles gives every stage even more personality. Which leads me to talk about one aspect about Gimmick that is truly impressive. I've delayed it long enough, let's dive into the presentation. As you might have seen by inspecting the footage I've used so far, Gimmick is a very good looking NES game, clearly showcasing the feel of the last years of the console's lifespan. The game runs at a smooth and consistent 60 frames per second. Graphics are clean and backgrounds are detailed enough to not become intrusive to the gameplay. I also must appreciate the fantastic sprite work for all of the characters, especially Jumetaro and the bosses. They are brought to life thanks to expressive moments and key poses, and a degree of cartoonishness that works wonders with the game's premise. Still, what makes the game come to life is not only the graphics or the animations, it's the insane attention to detail. Gameplay aside, Gimmick is a game that feels alive. It's like the stages that Jumetaro goes through are not just levels of a video game, they are small pieces of this strange and quirky world. Sakai's team was not only passionate about the game, but also extremely skilled when it comes to programming, and that shows through the behavior of the enemies and other characters you face. Like, if you ever wondered why this dark monster on the ship will never attack you, it's because it can be controlled by the second player for some reason. There are also details to stuff that's inoffensive to the player, like the dude at the start of stage 6. He's literally a guy going for a walk with his dog, and while the big guy will try to run away from Jumetaro, you can play around with the dog by throwing a star, and he will play catch with it. I mean, look at him wagging his tail, what a cute little puppy. There are countless examples of this, like how the turret enemy in stage 5 gives up and tries to attack you physically if the thing breaks down, or the fellow in stage 1 that's too shy to come out of his guard pose to fight you. In the end, these small things are infinitely valuable. It shows how much time was dedicated to polishing every single detail about the game. And in the end, it truly makes this world come to life in a way that feels impossible for something released in 1992 for a console that was almost 10 years old. There is purpose to everything in Gimmick, even the empty screens. Most of them are used for checkpoints, but then you have examples of them using empty screens to create tension before a big encounter with a boss. But if there is something that truly makes this game break through the supposed limits of the NES, it's the sound. Oh boy, I finally got to talk about this. As some of you may already know, Gimmick was one of the few games to incorporate an external sound enhancement chip that was built into the cartridge itself. In fact, it was the only game to ever use the Sunsoft 5B chip, an expansion of the already impressive FME7. To keep things from getting too technical, this small piece of hardware allowed the possibility of using 3 extra sound channels. This led Masashi Kageyama, the composer for the game, to go beyond and create music with an extra layer of complexity never seen before on the system. And I know music quality is a very subjective topic, since it's something purely based on preference unless you are well instructed in composition of music theory. Still, it is almost undeniable that Gimmick is easily one of the best sounding games in the entire NES library. On one hand, the quality of the sound isn't just the extra power of the 5-bit chip. The music itself is masterfully programmed to coexist with sound effects without the presence of those cuts that plague other games on the system. And on the other hand, there are the compositions themselves. In an interview with the same magazine, Kageyama spoke about his approach when composing the music for the game. He explains, "The music of Gimmick features ad-libbed portions, a product of jazz and fusion. Those aren't styles people normally hear. They don't really have an opportunity to listen to them. That is why I took it upon myself to incorporate them into the soundtrack." And that unique feel is elevated into the stratosphere thanks to just how memorable these tunes are. They all masterfully convey the mood for each scenario, like the easygoing upbeat melody of Happy Birthday that accompanies the first stage. Then there's the wondrous feel of slow illusion as you approach the woods. A track that suddenly turns into a tense piece as soon as you get to the end of the stage and Paradox starts playing. Or the funky rhythmic percussion of Lionheart that conveys the feeling of being inside a huge factory. The most iconic piece though, it has to be Good Morning, the track that plays during the intro cutscene and that will make the small 1-minute sequence very hard to escape on repeated playthroughs. However, that perfect combination of gameplay, presentation and music reaches its highest high on the final stage. Yep, that special stage I have mentioned multiple times already. I think that's enough teasing, it's time to get into what's inside this place. This is your time to leave if you don't want to be spoiled about it, so I'll drop you a quick timestamp on the screen to skip ahead and just get to my conclusion. Now allow me to waste a bunch of time to give you enough of a gap to go down into the description, just click that blue number and, you know, do whatever you need to. Okay, all set? Here we go. If you successfully completed all of the requirements after reaching the top of the tower, the game will show the map screen one last time as a floating castle descends into the scene. This is the 7th and final stage of Gimmick. A peaceful, calm place among the clouds. There are no enemies here, just creatures who inhabit this place. And if you attack them, they will either run away or ignore you. I especially find the white huge fellows to be very funny, because they don't care about you at all, unless you attack any of the birds. And you'll probably regret doing so. At the end though, once Yumetaro makes his way to the core of the floating castle, the final boss reveals himself. This fight is pretty tough, but after hitting him a few times, the cloak goes away and... would you look at that? I have heard multiple opinions about this boss's design, but to me, it feels perfect for a game like this. Considering these are all toys that got angry because their owner stopped caring about them, an action figure with a lightsaber makes perfect sense in my opinion. I mean, look at the other toys she has. He's a radical departure from the rest of the game, which is probably what the developers were going for. By the way, this is a 1v1, no items, final destination only sort of situation. He will destroy any item you throw at him, so it's up to you to attack when he finally drops his guard and land each star at the right spot. Do so a few times and the game is over. The story ends with a short cutscene showing Yumetaro rescuing his new friend as they make their escape back to the real world. Look at that, they even got back before sunrise. And well, now that they are finally fine, maybe I should wrap this up too. Even if unfortunately Gimmick passed under everyone's radar back when it was released, time has been kind to our green fellow. His creator jokes about it by saying that it took 10 years for the game to finally make its impact. And well, he's right, it was kinda like that. When the internet finally began to rise in popularity, old video games saw a renaissance, a second wind of sorts. And only then this game finally found its deserved appreciation. Its tight gameplay, memorable soundtrack, great graphics, and overwhelming charm resonated among those who got the chance to experience it. The game especially found its way among speedrunners, thanks to the high skill ceiling offered by the main mechanics. To me, it feels like a title that had the poor luck of coming out at an unfortunate time, with the NES slowly fading into retirement, and the overall feel of 90s trends, something like Gimmick was bound to have a tough time, had it ever crossed the oceans to reach other regions in a more official manner. While it's not considered to be a popular game by any means nowadays, and even if it may be a little bit unfair at times, Gimmick is easily one of the best entries on the system, and a game worth remembering. It is the living image of a difficult time for video games as a medium, a proof of the end of an era, the very first time that many players had to see their consoles replaced by stronger, more capable hardware. But just like I said back at the beginning, there were a few brave developers who didn't raise their flags and just moved on. Even if it wasn't well received back in '92, as time went on, thousands of players finally got to discover Yumetaro's one and only adventure. When the 30th anniversary came around in 2022, a special edition was released, becoming a good way for most players to experience this classic on nowadays hardware. They even added some extras like online leaderboards and a rewind button. So now allow me to pass the baton to you all. If you got to the end of the video and you haven't played the game yet, please give it a shot, I'm sure you won't be disappointed. And for those who knew about it, I hope I was able to portray why it's such a special game. It is truly unfortunate that most of us missed out on this one back then. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Gimmick is the hidden gem of the NES. This is BurnCrowSP, and thank you for watching. Oh, I wonder what Gimmick's up to nowadays. I mean, they released the special edition. Maybe... Wait,